I grew up in a small town in central Kentucky, not far from where state maintenance trucks turned around and where the woods started stretching for real, thick, humid, untamed patches that hadn't been cleared or flattened since long before I was born. My dad worked for the county for a while when I was a teenager, mostly road maintenance and snow duty in winter. One summer, they had him hauling roadkill out of ditches and off back roads. Deer mostly, some raccoons, possums, the occasional stray dog. He'd come home at night with the smell soaked into his clothes, even after he'd showered. The stink of it seemed to come from somewhere deeper than just skin or fabric. I didn't understand it until I had to do some work out near the DOT's offsite storage shed the summer I turned 24. I'd picked up a seasonal job helping with trail survey work, and part of the job involved checking paths that ran near state easements, places where you might find buried cable markers, erosion damage, or wildlife crossings. One of those trails ran within a few hundred yards of a fenced-off gravel lot where the DOT dumped carcasses before they got around to burning or burying them. I don't know why they didn't deal with them immediately. Probably too many deer, not enough trucks. What I do know is that pile, just outside the shed behind a double gate, was something I'd never forget. The stench of it wasn't just bad. It had weight to it, a kind of heat that felt like it coated your lungs. Even from across the field, it hit you like a wave. You'd catch the wind wrong, and your knees would go soft for a second. I only mention all this because years later, that exact smell hit me again, unexpected, out of nowhere, and I knew instantly what it was, or at least what it meant. And this time I was alone, deep in the woods, miles from any road, any town, any help. It was early fall, and I had planned a 3-day solo hike out in the Daniel Boone National Forest. I'd been slowly ticking off pieces of the Sheltawi Trace, doing 15 to 20-mile sections when I had the time off. Most of the trail is straightforward hardwoods, ridges, a few creek crossings. Not a lot of traffic if you go on weekdays. I had my usual setup: midweight pack, tent, filtration kit, 2 knives, flare, and enough protein bars to get me through. I layered up because the nights were getting cool, but during the day it still felt like summer. The first day was uneventful. Long stretches of trail lined with dry leaves and fading green. The trees were just starting to turn, and everything smelled like late summer giving up the fight. I hiked 12 miles and camped near a bend in a low, dry creek bed. I didn't even make a fire, just ate cold food, listened to the wind in the leaves, and watched the sky go orange and purple over the hills. The second day started normal enough, but by late morning I decided to take a detour. There's an old side trail, not maintained, not on the newer maps, that cuts off about a mile from the main Sheltawi route and runs west into a more remote ridge area. I'd seen it before but never followed it. I figured I had time. My GPS still worked and I had a map, so I wasn't going to get lost. I started down the old trail around 11 a.m. It was narrower, overgrown in spots, but still visible. The ground was soft and shaded. I saw a lot of deer sign tracks, scat, places where they'd bedded down under low branches. I kept moving, hoping maybe I'd find a clearing with a view where I could stop for lunch. That's when the smell hit me. It was sudden. No build-up, no gradual change. Just 1 minute I was walking, enjoying the cool breeze through the trees, and the next I was hit full-on with that thick, wet stench. The rot, the sick, sweet, sulfur-heavy stench of decomposing animal. I stopped in my tracks. It was unmistakable. It brought me right back to that storage shed. And it wasn't faint. It was strong, close. I looked around. The trail ahead curved to the left and dropped slightly. I couldn't see more than 30 feet through the trees, but I knew whatever was putting out that smell was just ahead. I thought about turning back, but part of me, the same part that always pushes me off the marked paths, wanted to see what it was. Curiosity, sure, but also caution. If there was a carcass nearby, it could mean predators. Coyotes, maybe, bears, maybe even a bobcat. And if I kept walking without checking, I could stumble right into one. So I moved forward slowly, one step at a time, hand near my belt, breathing through my mouth. I followed the curve of the trail and came to a low ridge overlooking a wide, shallow depression, almost like a bowl in the landscape. And there, just below me, was the source. Pile. Deer. Half a dozen at least. Maybe more. They weren't scattered. They were stacked, legs tangled, heads bent at weird angles. Some were bloated, others deflated, and all of them in varying stages of decay. The worst part was that they hadn't been there long, maybe a few days. Flies covered everything. Maggots wriggled in patches of exposed flesh. A pair of antlers stuck up from the top of the heap like a flag. I backed up instinctively. My brain struggled to piece it together. This wasn't natural. Animals don't die like this. Not in a pile. Not in one place. Something or someone had put them there. I scanned the area for signs of a vehicle, but there was nothing. No tire tracks. No dragging marks. Just the pile. Clean. Intentional. That's when I noticed the hooks. Metal hooks. Big ones, like the kind you'd see in a slaughterhouse. 4 of them hammered into a tree nearby. Empty now, but stained dark. I stared at them for a while, then turned and looked back the way I came. I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't run. I moved fast, but I didn't run. I've hiked enough to know that panic can get you hurt worse than anything else. Twisted ankles, falls, getting lost. So I walked, focused, straight back the way I came. But after about a quarter mile, I realized I wasn't retracing the trail I'd taken in. The undergrowth was different. The slope was wrong. There were no boot prints. I had turned somewhere, maybe near the ridge, maybe earlier, and now I was off course. I pulled out the GPS and checked. Dead. No signal. Nothing. I tried rebooting it. Still nothing. I took out the paper map. But the old trail wasn't on it, and I couldn't pinpoint where the ridge or the depression was. I had no reference. I kept walking. For the next hour, everything looked wrong. The trees looked the same in every direction. Tall, thin trunks, bare undergrowth, little light. No sign of people. No wrappers, no footprints, no blazes. Just woods. Then I heard something. A thump. Not an animal sound. Not footsteps either. It was deliberate. Heavy. I crouched and stayed still. Another thump. Closer this time. I waited, heart hammering. Listening. Silence. Then the buzzing returned. Louder this time. Like before, but angrier. Swarming. I stood up and started moving again. Faster now. My skin itched. I kept slapping at my neck, my ears, the back of my hands. I felt like something was crawling inside my sleeves. I could smell the rot again, faint but present, like it was following me. Then I saw the tarp. Bright blue, out of place, laid flat between 2 trees, weighed down with stones. I approached slowly, looked under the edge. More carcasses. Deer again. Smaller ones. Fawns. Carefully arranged. Someone had been doing this a while. I didn't touch anything. I didn't look long. I turned and walked in the opposite direction. Another hour passed before I saw something familiar. A bent tree I'd passed earlier, where a lightning strike had split the trunk. I was back on the trail. I didn't stop. I hiked out without eating, without drinking. I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel anything. Back at the car, I peeled off my pack, slammed the door, and drove. I didn't report it. I should have. I thought about it for days. But the truth is, I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to go back out there with a game warden, pointing at trees and trying to explain what I saw. What would I even say? That someone was dragging roadkill into the forest and stacking them like firewood? That they were using hooks, tarps? That they were close enough to smell me before I smelled them? I still hike. I stick to marked trails now, well-traveled ones. I let people know where I'm going and when I'll be back. And I never follow old side trails anymore. Because every time I think about that smell, that heavy, wet rot, I remember how it wasn't just coming from the pile. It was in the air around me, like someone had been carrying it with them, watching, waiting, and I don't ever want to know what kind of person makes a habit out of that. A few years ago, I went camping with a pretty large group of people, about 45 of us all together. We had planned this trip for weeks. Everyone was excited and ready for some time away from the city, deep in the woods near a river. When we arrived, the main campground was already full, packed with other campers and tents stretching as far as you could see. It was a busy weekend, and we hadn't reserved spots ahead of time. Because of this, me and the two girls I was supposed to share a tent with had to find a place across the road from the main campground. This was by the river, which should have been nice, but it meant we were kind of separated from the rest of the group, a little more isolated. I remember thinking it was fine at the time. The sound of the river flowing nearby was calming and peaceful. The area was surrounded by tall trees that swayed gently with the wind. The grass was soft, and there was plenty of space to pitch our tents. We spent the first day setting up camp, laughing and chatting as we got everything ready. The three of us worked well together. We brought our backpacks, sleeping bags, and a few supplies we thought we might need. I had my flashlight, some snacks, and my phone, though the signal was weak. I didn't bring a gun, never felt the need to, and I had left my small hunting knife in the car because I didn't want to carry it around all day. It seemed safe enough, and honestly, I didn't think we'd need it. That first night was quiet. We cooked some hot dogs over the fire with the rest of our group and then settled into our tents early. I remember feeling relaxed, listening to the sounds of the forest at night. Crickets chirping, frogs croaking, and the river rushing softly nearby. It was all very natural and peaceful. The moon was out, casting a faint silver glow through the trees. I fell asleep quickly, tired from the day's activities. But the second night was a completely different story. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night to noises outside our tent. At first, it sounded like small animals moving through the bushes, maybe raccoons or something similar. The soft rustling made me tense up, but I told myself it was just the forest being alive. Then, something deeper and darker growled, a low, guttural sound that sent a chill straight down my spine. It sounded exactly like a cougar. My heart started pounding. I could almost feel the animal's presence just outside, maybe even watching us. The growl was close and angry. I didn't want to wake the other girl because I doubted she'd be able to handle the fear as well as the girl sleeping closest to me. I nudged her awake gently, whispering to keep calm, though I was scared myself. We sat in the dark, barely breathing, listening as the growling continued for what felt like an hour. Neither of us had any weapons or even much protection. I had no gun, and the knife was still in the car miles away. We were defenseless against whatever might be out there. I kept my flashlight close, just in case, but I knew shining it outside would probably just attract attention. So we prayed silently, holding each other's hands tightly, prepared to fight if we had to. The night stretched on like a nightmare. The growling shifted to occasional soft footsteps, heavy and slow, circling the tent. My mind raced with all the terrible things that could happen. I imagined the cougar trying to claw through the fabric, its sharp teeth flashing in the moonlight. I tried not to move, thinking any noise might give away our position or provoke it. Finally, the noises slowly faded away. The growling stopped. The heavy footsteps moved off into the distance. It was like the threat passed as quietly as it had come. We didn't sleep a wink after that. We just sat in silence, holding on to each other until the sky began to lighten with dawn. When morning came, I stepped outside, my legs still shaky. The grass was wet with dew, and the river sparkled under the sun. The world looked calm, almost as if nothing had happened. But we knew better. The fear from the night still clung to us. Later, we found out the truth. The growling, the footsteps, and the animal noises weren't from cougars at all. It was a couple of guys from the campsite across the road. They had been messing around, making animal sounds and trying to scare us. They thought it was funny, part of their idea of a prank. All of us were in our 30s, grown adults. I wasn't angry at them. I understood that people joke and try to have fun in weird ways sometimes. But after that night, I never wanted to go camping again. The fear felt too real, too close. Knowing it was just a prank didn't erase the feeling of being helpless and vulnerable. Even now, when I think back to that night by the river, I remember how quiet it was, how real the danger felt, even if it was just in my head. It was a hellish night that left its mark on me. Camping lost its charm, and I haven't been back since. I set up my tent in a small clearing surrounded by thick forest. It was late summer, and the air smelled like pine needles and damp earth. I had been looking forward to this solo camping trip for weeks. Just me, some quiet time away from the city, and the chance to clear my head. The spot wasn't far off the trail, but far enough that I wouldn't get bothered by other campers or hikers. The sun was dipping low behind the trees as I finished pitching my tent, and the sky turned a soft orange pink. Right near my campsite stood a single dead tree. It looked out of place among all the green and life around it. Its bark was dry and cracked, and its branches stuck out like crooked fingers, bare and lifeless. I hadn't noticed it much when I first arrived, but now, with the fading light, it gave me a weird feeling, like it was watching. I shook the thought off and went about getting a fire going. That first night, I laid in my sleeping bag, the fire crackling softly outside my tent flap. I was half listening to the sounds of the forest, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the wind, when I noticed a faint sound coming from the direction of the dead tree. It was soft at first, like a distant buzz, almost like the static you hear when a TV or radio isn't tuned right. The sound wasn't constant, but it came and went in short bursts. Curious, I zipped open my tent and looked towards the tree. The night was dark but clear, and the moonlight made the bare branches stand out sharply. The static noise wasn't loud enough to be more than a whisper in the quiet forest, but it definitely came from near the tree. I sat up for a while, trying to figure out what was causing it. There were no wires or any kind of electronics around. I thought maybe it was just my imagination or the way the wind was moving through the dead branches, but the sound was too consistent and clear to be just wind. Over the next few nights, the static noise became a strange routine. Each night, around the same time, the buzzing would start near the tree. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard not to notice. Phones and radios I brought with me would glitch and buzz if I held them close to the tree. Once, I even tried tuning my small handheld radio while standing near it. The static got so loud and harsh that the radio lost signal completely and shut off. I didn't bring much technology with me to begin with, just my phone and that radio for emergencies. Both worked fine when I moved away from the tree, but when I went back, they acted like they were being jammed. I thought maybe it was some kind of strange interference from the environment, solar activity, or a nearby transmitter I didn't know about. The forest was pretty remote, but I couldn't be sure. On the fourth night, something happened that shook me. I'd been watching the dead tree again, sitting by my fire. The static was there as usual, that low, crackling sound. I felt a strange pull towards the tree, like it was drawing me in. Against my better judgment, I stood up and walked closer. The closer I got, the louder the static became. It was almost painful in my ears. I reached out and touched the rough bark. The moment my palm pressed against the tree, everything went black. I don't know how long I was out. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground about 20 feet away from the tree, my palms stinging and soaked with blood. I looked down and saw deep scrapes and cuts across my hands, like I'd been dragged or clawed. I checked my pockets and found a chunk of bark, roughly the size of a fist, covered in my blood. At first, I panicked, trying to remember what had happened. I didn't feel any injuries besides my hands. No bruises or cuts on my arms or legs. No bumps on my head. It was like I had just blacked out and moved without knowing it. I crawled back to my tent, heart racing, trying to make sense of it all. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the fire, hands wrapped in cloth to stop the bleeding, watching the dead tree. The static noise was back, but quieter now, almost like it was waiting for something. I felt sick, but more than that, I felt a deep unease, like whatever was in that tree wasn't natural. I tried to convince myself it was just some weird environmental effect or a natural phenomenon I didn't understand. The next morning, I inspected the chunk of bark I found. It was dry and rough, and I could see tiny black specks in the wood, almost like burnt resin. There were no signs of insects or fungus, just old dead wood. I wondered if maybe something inside the tree had caused my blackout, like a chemical or a toxin, but I felt fine otherwise, no dizziness or nausea. I packed up my gear that day, deciding to leave. The place didn't feel safe anymore, but before I left, I did one last thing. I walked over to the tree, keeping my distance this time, and scanned the area carefully. On the ground around the base, I noticed faint scratches in the dirt. Not from an animal, but from something sharp, almost like claw marks. They weren't deep, but they were too regular to be random. The marks formed a rough circle around the tree, about 10 feet out. I backed away slowly. The sun was rising, and the forest was waking up. Birds started singing, and the air warmed up with morning light. I didn't look back as I hiked out of the clearing, the feeling in my gut telling me this was one thing I wasn't meant to figure out. Since then, I haven't camped anywhere near that spot or any dead trees like it. The static sound, the blackout, and the blood on my hands felt like a warning. Something about that tree was wrong. Something that messed with my mind and body in ways I can't explain. Maybe it was a rare natural phenomenon, maybe something else, but whatever it was, I don't want to find out what happens if I touch it again. I tell people about it now, trying to make sense of it myself. But I've never heard of anything like it, and no one believes me. Sometimes, late at night, I can still hear a faint crackle in my ear, like static from a TV left on too long. And I wonder if that tree is still out there, waiting for the next person to come too close. I'd seen the pictures online before my trip. Hawaiian cane spider. I typed into Google after hearing the name dropped in a forum about camping in tropical areas. The images had popped up, and even then, even just staring at them through the safety of a screen, I had flinched. Big legs, thick body, a sprawl the size of my hand, maybe larger. I remembered thinking it looked more like something out of a bad dream than a real thing that walked on walls and ceilings. But I figured it was the kind of thing you read about and then forget once you're out in the woods. I was wrong. I flew to the Big Island for a week-long solo hiking trip in late June. I wanted something remote, something green and wild and quiet. I'd booked a basic off-grid eco hut inland, deep in the rainforest, away from the coast and tourist areas, the kind of place where you have to bring your own food, and the only sounds at night are crickets, wind, and whatever moves through the trees when the sun goes down. The first few days were amazing. I hiked 4 different trails, 2 near waterfalls, one that went through a lava tube, and one through a ridge with a view of the ocean. The hut didn't have electricity, but it had a screened-in bed area and a water tank that collected rain for washing up. It was the kind of place that makes you forget about your phone within minutes. I felt grounded, relaxed, happy to be alone with my thoughts. Then on the 5th day, I picked a trail that started about 10 miles south of the hut. A rough dirt road led to a gate and a small sign with barely legible trail information carved into a warped wooden board. The trail itself wasn't well traveled. No tourists, no noise. Just me, the jungle, and miles of quiet. The kind of hike I lived for. I started around 9 a.m. The trail wound deep into the rainforest. Tall trees arched overhead, dripping with vines and moss. The ground was soft and covered in thick layers of fallen leaves. Ferns rose on both sides, waist-high in places. Every now and then, I passed muddy patches where pigs had rooted through the soil, but I never saw any actual animals. The deeper I went, the more humid it got. My shirt clung to my back, my hat soaked through with sweat. I drank from my water bottle regularly, stopping to stretch and take in the silence. It was perfect. At around mile 3, I found a clearing. A circle of broken trees opened up above, and sunlight poured through the canopy in strips. I sat on a fallen log, peeled a boiled egg I'd packed, and took a long sip of water. Everything felt calm. I hadn't seen another person all day, and I doubted anyone else was even on the trail. About 100 feet from the clearing, there was an old shack. More like a lean-to, really. Just some rusted sheets of corrugated metal nailed to a wooden frame, maybe left behind by a hunter or old land worker. It was leaning hard to one side, and the roof looked like it would collapse in the next storm. But curiosity got the better of me, and after finishing my egg, I walked over. Inside was just as empty and forgotten as I expected. A broken plastic chair, a few beer cans, and an old tarp rolled into the corner. What caught my attention, though, was the wall. Pinned to one of the wooden beams with a rusty nail was a thick, brown leg. I thought it was a centipede at first, long and segmented, but then I saw the hairs, the shape. It wasn't a centipede. It was a spider leg, thick and curled and at least 3 inches long. I didn't see the rest of it, just that one part, stuck there like someone had torn it off and left it. I backed out of the shack slowly. I don't know why, but the air felt heavier, like something was watching. I looked up into the trees, scanned the bushes, listened for any movement. Nothing. I shrugged it off, told myself it was probably old. Maybe a bird dragged it in, or maybe the wind blew it up from the forest floor. I turned back to the trail and kept walking. That was when things started to feel off. It was subtle at first. The trail narrowed in strange ways, like the brush was reclaiming it faster than normal. Spiderwebs crossed the path every 100 feet, forcing me to duck or wave them aside with a stick. I stopped to take a sip of water and noticed my arms were dotted with tiny red bumps. Bug bites. I hadn't felt them until then. Then, near mile 4, I saw the first one. It was on a tree trunk just off the trail, about 6 feet up. A Hawaiian cane spider. Not a photo, not an exaggeration, real, massive, and horrifying. It was the size of my outstretched palm, just resting on the bark. Legs fanned out like it owned the whole damn tree. Its body was thick, covered in short brown hairs, and its eyes gleamed slightly in the filtered light. It didn't move, but I could see the weight of it. Like if you shook the tree, it would drop like a stone. I kept walking. A quarter mile later, I saw another. This one was on the trail itself. It ran across my path ahead, fast as lightning, vanishing into the undergrowth with a dry rustle of leaves. I flinched hard, nearly dropped my bottle. My heart was pounding now, and my breathing was shallow. I hate spiders. I always have. I respect them in the abstract, but I don't want to share ground with one I can hear walking. I slowed my pace, eyes scanning the ground ahead of every step. At mile 5, I made the mistake of resting again. There was another small clearing, with a flat patch of moss-covered lava rock that looked perfect for a short break. I sat down, trying to calm myself, trying to convince my nerves that it was all in my head. But the second I leaned back to stretch, I heard it. A soft, rapid skittering, dry like fingers tapping on plastic. I turned just in time to see one running toward me. It came from the bushes, moving so fast it didn't even seem real. It wasn't aggressive, not aiming for me directly, but it moved across the rock toward a fallen log, and the sight of it broke something inside me. It was huge, the same thick legs, the same way it hugged the surface with every step, as if it were part of the forest floor itself. And it moved with purpose, not clumsy, not slow, like it knew exactly where it was going. I jumped to my feet and backed away fast. My whole body was shaking. My shirt was soaked through with sweat. My hands were clenched so tight around my walking stick that my knuckles ached. I didn't want to keep going. I didn't want to go back the way I came either. I just wanted out. I picked up the pace. The last 2 miles blurred together in flashes of panic. I saw at least 5 more spiders, some on trees, some on rocks, one even hanging under a low branch I almost walked into. Each one froze me in place. Each one chipped away at my ability to stay calm. I didn't run, but I walked faster than I ever had on a trail. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. When I finally saw the end of the trail, I almost cried. The gate came into view, the dirt road beyond it shimmering in the afternoon heat. I stepped through it like I was stepping back into the real world. I turned around once to look back, half expecting one of them to be following me. But the trees were still. The trail was quiet. I drove back to the hut with the windows down and the fan on full blast, trying to flush the panic out of my head. But it stayed with me. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining legs crawling up the wall near my bed, or something moving across my sleeping bag while I was too tired to react. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thick, heavy body clinging to the tree trunk, perfectly still, perfectly real. I cut the trip short the next day, packed up my gear, drove back to the airport early, and rebooked my flight. I told myself it was because of weather or work or heat, but I knew the truth. I can't see pictures of cane spiders anymore. I don't Google them. I don't read about them in forums. I don't want to know if they're common or rare or harmless. I just know what I saw, how it felt, and how that trip left something crawling in the back of my brain that I still can't shake. Sometimes it's not what you hear in the woods that stays with you. It's what you see and can't ever unsee. The cabin stood at the edge of a dense forest, far from any town or road, hidden behind tall pines that blocked the wind and swallowed most of the daylight. It was old but sturdy, with wooden walls darkened by time and a roof that creaked when the wind blew. The gravel driveway leading to it was rough, making the car bounce and rattle with every bump. We'd rented it for a week, hoping for a quiet break away from the city, a place to relax and enjoy nature. The kids were excited. 2 little girls and a boy, and my wife and I had our own hopes for peace and rest. When we first arrived, the owner was waiting outside. He was an older man with a rough face and tired eyes, dressed like someone who had spent most of his life outdoors. He handed us the keys and gave us a quick walkthrough of the cabin. It was simple inside: a living room with an old stone fireplace, a small kitchen with a wood stove, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom. But there was one thing that stood out immediately: a heavy wooden door set into the floor in the corner of the living room. It looked out of place, darker and more solid than the rest of the cabin, with a strong metal lock bolted on. He warned us once, very clearly but quietly, not to go down there. He said it was locked for a reason. "That basement hasn't been used for years," he said, looking at me like he didn't want to get into it, but also didn't want us to be careless. "Some accident happened down there a long time ago. It's best to just leave it alone." That was all he said, and I didn't press him. It felt like one of those old cabin stories people tell. A place with some secret best left unopened. I told the kids it was just an old storage space and locked it up in my mind. The first day passed quietly. We hiked along the nearby trails, cooked dinner over the stove, and made a small fire outside. The girls ran around the yard chasing bugs and collecting pine cones, and our son kept asking to explore more. Night came early in the forest, and after tucking the kids into bed, my wife and I sat by the fireplace, the light flickering against the walls. The basement door was there, a dark square in the floor, locked and silent. The second night was when things started to feel off. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when the youngest girl, Emma, came in holding her blanket tightly. She looked scared, her eyes wide. "Daddy," she said quietly, "I hear a man crying downstairs." I paused, rinsing a plate, and tried to smile. "There's no one down there, Em. It's just the wind or maybe the pipes." She shook her head, her lip trembling. "No, really, it's a man. He sounds sad, crying." I glanced toward the basement door, where the lock glinted dimly in the kitchen light. I wanted to believe her. The rest of the house was quiet, the woods outside silent except for the soft rustle of leaves. I told her to try to ignore it and that we'd check in the morning. Later, my wife was reading in the living room when she heard it too. At first, she thought it was a trick of the night sounds, an owl maybe, or a distant animal. But the sound was too steady, too clear. A low, soft crying, muffled but unmistakable. She called me over, and we stood quietly by the basement door, listening. It was definitely there, faint, distant, like someone trapped far below. I knocked on the door firmly, expecting no answer. None came. The crying stopped immediately, as if whoever it was had heard me and gone silent. My heart pounded. I called the owner on the phone, hoping he'd explain what was going on. He answered but was tight-lipped. He refused to talk about the basement in detail, just repeating that it was sealed after an accident years ago. No one was supposed to go down there. He said that the crying we heard must be the wind or the old cabin settling. But his voice didn't sound convincing. That night, the crying came again. It woke me up. I lay in bed listening, frozen, as the quiet sobs echoed through the floorboards. The sound wasn't just a trick of imagination anymore. It was real, and it was coming from beneath us. It wasn't the wind. It was something alive down there, trapped or hurt, and unable to get out. We couldn't stay. The next morning, we packed quickly. The kids were quiet, their earlier excitement gone, replaced by a strange heaviness. As we left, I looked back at the cabin one last time. The basement door stayed shut, but I could almost feel something watching us, waiting below the locked floor. Driving away, the woods closed behind us like a wall, hiding whatever was trapped down in that dark basement. I never called the owner again. I never wanted to know more. All I knew was that sometimes the past stays locked up for a reason, and some doors should never be opened. I've been driving trucks for a while now, not decades like some old-timers, but long enough to know the feel of the road and recognize when something's off. There's a rhythm to long-haul work, hours of monotony broken up by the occasional pit stop, a strange encounter at a diner, or a near miss on a snowy mountain pass. I've done cross-country, desert routes, night hauls through Midwest backroads, you name it. But nothing sticks in my mind like what happened on a stretch of Route 191 in Arizona. It was early August, dry and hot even after dark. I was running late on a job that had me hauling a half-loaded reefer trailer north from the border. My GPS had me detour down this desolate road to cut off time. Some remote two-lane highway surrounded by rocks and scrubland. No cell service, no rest stops, no headlights coming from the other direction. I was 2 hours into the darkness, somewhere north of Clifton but far from any major town. My eyes were dry, and I remember being halfway through my second energy drink when I spotted it. Up ahead on the right shoulder, just past a long curve, there was a truck, an old Peterbilt, pulled off to the side with its hazard lights flashing. At first glance, I figured maybe the driver had a breakdown. Maybe a blown tire, maybe overheating, or just stopped to catch a breath like many of us do out here. But there was something strange. No one was around. The door on the driver's side was half open. No movement, no flashlight flickering, nothing. Just that faint amber blink, tick, 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 reflecting off the rocky road shoulder. I slowed down instinctively, then came to a stop a bit ahead of it. Safety thing, see if a fellow trucker needed help. I flipped on my own hazards, checked my side mirror, and waited a minute, expecting someone to walk up. Nothing. Just wind, just the ticking. I stepped down, the crunch of gravel under my boots sharp in the silence. The air was thick, not hot exactly, but still and close. You get used to strange smells on the road, engine oil, piss bottles, roadkill. But something here was off. It wasn't rot, more like that dry, sour tang you get in old garages. Dust, grease, and something that had been sitting too long. The other truck was dusty, more than you'd expect if it had only been sitting a few hours. Layers of it on the windshield, streaks like something had brushed past it. The front grille had bugs caked in thick, dried layers. There were boot prints around the door, but they didn't go far. Just loops like someone had walked in circles. The cab door was open a few inches, just enough to make you feel like it was supposed to be inviting. I knocked on the fender as I got closer, a force of habit more than anything. Still no movement. I leaned in and looked through the open driver door. The inside was dark. Nothing jumped out, no keys, no wallet or phone in sight. An open bottle of water was in the cup holder, label faded from sun exposure. The seats looked worn but clean. Floor mats dusty. No clutter. Just sterile. Empty. There was something about how the seat was pushed back, almost like someone had launched themselves out of it in a hurry. And there was a smell. That garage smell again, but stronger. Not quite fuel, not quite decay. Just dry and chemical and wrong. I circled around to the back of the cab. The trailer was a box type, unmarked. No company logos. That was odd. Most trucks, even independents, have some kind of markings, DOT number, faded decals, something. But this thing was bare, like it had been scrubbed. The door latches were down, not locked, just loosely secured with one thin wire twist. I stood there for a long minute. Something in me didn't want to open that door. I've hauled everything, produce pallets of tires, medical equipment, even beehives once, and I know the feel of a load. But this trailer felt still, like it was empty or holding something dense and immobile. My curiosity eventually got the better of me. I undid the twist of wire, felt the latch shift under my hand with a creak, and opened the right side door halfway. It was dark inside. At first, I couldn't see anything but shadows. Then my eyes adjusted. The trailer wasn't empty. Far from it. Inside, near the back wall, were stacks of what looked like thick, black plastic bins. They were large, like the kind people use for heavy-duty storage. Industrial ones. They were stacked neatly, but not all the way to the ceiling, just 3 or 4 high. I stepped closer, flashlight out now. As I moved my light across the surface, I noticed something else. The walls of the trailer had been lined. Foam padding, dark and glued on like insulation. Not typical for this kind of trailer unless you're moving something sensitive. But this didn't look like standard work. It looked homemade. I backed out without going any farther and closed the door. Whatever this guy had been hauling, I didn't want anything to do with it. Maybe stolen goods. Maybe something worse. I took a couple steps back toward my truck when I saw it. Just a flicker of motion out of the corner of my eye, inside the cab of the other truck. It was just the tiniest movement, enough to make me stop mid-step. I looked back. That cab door had moved. It was wider open than before. I was sure of it. I turned and walked, fast now, back to my own truck. I climbed in, locked the doors, flipped off my hazards, and started rolling. I didn't want to be near that thing anymore. I told myself maybe the wind caught the door. Maybe my eyes were tired. But that bad feeling clung to me. It was the quiet. Something was too quiet. You don't realize how much sound the desert usually makes until it's dead still. 20 minutes up the road, I hit a pull-off and parked. I needed to breathe, think. The highway was empty behind me. No headlights, no taillights, nothing. I sat for a long time, and then I did something I still regret. I turned around. I told myself I just wanted to get the license plate, maybe call it in when I got signal, maybe warn someone. But in truth, I was curious, stupidly curious. I headed back down the road, slower this time, watching. The desert looked the same, but the heat felt different, heavier, like something sitting on my chest. Took longer than I expected to find the truck again. Maybe I passed it, maybe I didn't, but just as I was about to turn back around, there it was, barely visible in the moonlight, hazard still flashing. I slowed to a stop behind it again. I kept my engine running this time. I just wanted the plate, that's all. But the plate was gone. Clean metal where it should have been. Not scratched or broken, just gone. No bolts, like it was never there. That's when I noticed something else. The trailer doors. They were open, wide open, both of them. And the bins? Gone. The trailer was empty now. I was frozen in place. My headlights lit up the interior of that trailer just enough to see the shadows curling up the sides. That bad smell was stronger now, even from inside my cab. The kind of dry, chemical stink that made your throat itch. My fingers tightened around the wheel. I was about to throw it in gear and peel out of there, but something caught my eye in the mirror. Movement, behind my trailer. First, it was just a flicker, then two shapes. People, or what I thought were people. I leaned forward to get a better look, heart pounding. They weren't walking like normal people, more like stumbling or dragging themselves. One of them had something slung over its back, a long shape wrapped in black plastic. The other one, couldn't tell. It was hunched, slow, like injured or sick. They were coming toward me. I didn't wait any longer. I slammed it into gear and drove. My tires kicked up gravel as I pulled away fast, swerving onto the road with a hard jolt. The trailer bounced behind me. My eyes were on the mirrors the entire time, but they weren't following me. They didn't even seem to notice I was leaving. I drove for over an hour before I got cell service. Pulled into a gas station, locked my doors, and sat there, staring out at the night. I thought about calling someone. Cops. Hell, anyone. But what would I even say? There's an abandoned truck full of plastic bins and maybe bodies and a pair of people walking around it in the middle of the desert? They'd think I was high. I didn't make that call. But a week later, I checked the news. Nothing. No reports of a truck on Route 191. No missing trailers. No found bodies. No strange containers. It was like it never existed. Except for one thing. The next time I was on a long haul through Texas, I pulled into a rest stop in the middle of nowhere. 3 a.m. A few other trucks were already parked, cabs dark. I was walking to the bathroom when I saw a familiar shape in the corner of the lot. Same old Peterbilt, same stripped trailer, same open cab door. This time I didn't stop. I didn't go near it. I got back in my truck and drove straight through till daylight. Didn't even sleep that night. I don't know what that truck is, or who's using it. But every few months, I hear stories, quiet ones, on the radio or from other drivers. Someone passed a strange truck on a desert road. Someone's